So welcome everyone to the December meeting of the District 23 Zonta Says Now think tank. I'll just share the screen before I forget and just confirm that you can see that. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Okay. And today I've asked you to put your microphones on mute during the presentations, and you can ask any questions in the chat line. So, and Sandra, can you keep an eye on the chat line for me? So as otherwise I think I miss things. That'll be great. So what we normally do, Alida was asking where we were all from. So if you'd like to put where you're from in the chat line, that would be really great. It will help Alida, picture where everybody is. This is our last meeting for 2023, and we've got a full agenda, so I'll get moving. We always like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in all the places that we meet from today, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. At each meeting, we like to acknowledge an Aboriginal female leader, and today we acknowledge Indigenous health leader Janine Mohammed, who's been selected as the 2024 Australian of the Year for Victoria for championing culturally safe healthcare and forging pathways for Indigenous health workers. She's the Chief Executive of the Lewitja Institute in Melbourne and was previously the Chief Executive of the Congress of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Nurses and Midwives. In addition to being an adjunct professor in nursing at the University of South Australia, in 2020, she received an honorary doctorate in nursing at Edith Cowan University in Perth. So she covers most of District 23. She's committed to dismantling racism, expanding opportunities for Indigenous health workers, and integrating cultural safety through the system. Anyway, she's now in the mix to become Australian of the Year, which will be announced in Canberra on January the 25th, and we wish her well. We use this steam train to describe why Zonta Says Now and show the links between climate change and gender inequality. The train was developed during the Industrial Revolution at a time when humans began to increase their greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. These have accumulated to form a blanket around the Earth, causing global heating and more extreme weather events. These extreme droughts, fires, floods and storms trigger social disruption, displacing millions of people and disrupting livelihoods. This social disruption magnifies any existing inequality, including gender inequality. So Zonta Says Now seeks to stop the train by advocating for countries to meet their obligations under the Paris Climate Agreement and to close gender gaps in education, economic opportunity and decision-making. And we use 3 tools to achieve this: our website, our think tanks and our framework for action. We've developed many resources along the way to help us learn how to build a better world for women and girls through taking gender equal climate action. And these can be found on our website, including this year's disaster management leaflet. Anyway, I'm going to call on Sue to introduce Alida. Over to you, Sue.
Okay, right, thank you. So Alida is a councillor for Banyule Council in Victoria. Alida has just finished a term as Deputy Mayor. Alida is a professional landscape architect and works in urban planning. She's interested in sustainability issues in planning, design and lifestyle. And she sees it as very important to be informed about climate action and climate change and the need for us to be doing as much as we can in that area as possible in our communities now and in the future. She's been instrumental in moving Banyule Council forward in the areas of sustainability and climate change and the community as well. I've also asked Alida because we were just talking about we have a focus on women leaders, good women leaders in the climate change area. And Alida's really struck me as that seeing Alida work in the community, seeing the way that Alida takes genuine interest in people and issues. She gives very sound advice to people. She gives the residents a voice, and a very genuine voice. And I think everybody in the community really appreciates that. It doesn't matter if they're in her ward or not. Alita's also a member of the Greens, but she also wears her politics very well. So it helps her philosophy, but I think everybody in the community feels heard by a leader, and I think that's really good in this day and age too. In council, I think also council is one way that a lot of people have the ability to have some influence in government, to have some say in government. And it's really important that they feel that their councillor is working for them, that their councillor is really interested in the community. And I think that a leader does that in spades. And so I really think that she's brought a revival to the council for the community. And I think her idea of how she wants to move forward is shared by a great deal of us. So I'm very proud to say that she is a councillor for Banyule Council. I'm just going to share a little story that Alita doesn't know. But on November the 24th, there's a big rally around Australia against domestic violence, and we had a few people there. And Banyule Council had a banner and a number of people. So I went up and introduced myself and said I'm a resident, and I said, oh, Alita's coming to talk to our Zonta Says Now meeting. And the council workers, they were all council staff, they were like, we love Alita. And like I was like, wow, if you've got the council workers on side, you've got the community on side, you know, everybody's focused on your vision. And I think, well done, Alita. We're really looking forward to hearing from you today.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Very, very generous introduction. And yes, I hadn't heard that story. If anything, I would have thought that the officers would be pushing back against me, because I spend a lot of time pushing back against their recommendations in the council chamber. So it is nice to hear those words. Thank you very much. And thank you, Zonta, for having me today to talk about environmental sustainability. And I am very lucky that some of our staff have helped me prepare a presentation for you. But before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung as the traditional custodians of the land we are on, and I pay my respects to Aboriginal elders, past, present and emerging. But I might just add too that I'd like to see an additional line added to that acknowledgement, and that is the acknowledgement of our First Nations people in relation to their care of our natural environment over the many thousands of years. And on Wednesday night, we at Council had a meeting of our biodiversity working group, which I'm very honoured to chair, to present where we're at with a new strategy for biodiversity in Banyule, which will be released next year. And the staff presented a different acknowledgement, which was around the natural environment. And I've asked them to see if we can incorporate environment and First Nations care of it into that acknowledgement. So hopefully we'll see that in the future. But without further ado, because I would like to leave time for questions, I'm not sure how much time we have today. If I could just be given an indication, so it'll help me to perhaps not speak too much and hear more from yourselves.
Carol, you're on mute.
About 15-20 minutes, Alita, whatever you're comfortable with, that's fine. And I'm sure in our discussion we'll see how we go.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for that, Carol. So I'll start by sharing my screen then. Hit the share button, and that should take me into the Zonta presentation. So is that coming up okay?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. Yes, so I'm going to provide an overview of where Banyule City Council is, and here and there I'll provide some anecdotes about how the politics works around it too, because we do have a lovely vision for our council, and it's all about community. It's all about doing the right thing by environment and listening to our community, and it's all very hunky-dory. But of course, how things play out politically can sometimes be very different. But
Alida, your PowerPoint presentation is showing your notes at the bottom. I just thought I'd let you know.
yes, and I'm not quite sure if I can how to.
Go to
There
the
we go.
right where you
Look, is it better?
no, just go to the bottom of your screen.
Yes.
And where you've got go right, 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 stop. That left, 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 stop. Hit that one.
How's that? Is
There
that
we go.
better?
Now we've got full screen. Can you see your notes?
I can see my notes, yes.
Okay, that's all right then. Okay, thanks for that.
Now that's full screen. I'm just going to ask one more question. Just make sure no, I don't need to ask that question. So we'll move right ahead.
Brilliant.
Yes, so you've probably read the bottom of the screen for this first slide. I'll be talking about some of our sustainability strategies and programs, some of our key challenges, and the importance of collaborative efforts across the sector, as well as our upcoming priorities. So these are some of the strategies that Council has in place to strengthen our sustainable environment. And of course, the first key one is to protect and enhance our natural environment, providing connected habitat for diverse flora and fauna. And then there's a range leading to 8 of them, talking about minimising stormwater pollution, demonstrating leadership, empowering and educating the community to take action. And that's a bit like what I believe Zonta is doing, taking action to empower through advocacy and service, avoiding waste generation, and encouraging and supporting community to achieve zero waste to landfill. That's an area where we actually have achieved a lot of ground in the past 3 years. Engaging in and working with the community to partner and protect and experience the environment. I've done quite a bit of work in that area, which I'm happy to talk about. And also protecting, increasing and maintaining Banyul's urban forest. And we've just adopted a new urban forest strategy. And the last one, exploring and supporting opportunities for urban farming and community gardens, but not just that, urban food security and urban food protection for all of Melbourne's food bowl has been an initiative that I've driven hard for since I started on the council, and was absolutely honoured and delighted to be able to launch our first urban food strategy only a month ago. So our climate action journey. We have two strategic documents that drive our climate action initiatives. The first being our CERP plan, which drives corporate emissions and reduction of those for net zero emissions. And how we're looking with that is pretty much on target to achieve zero net emissions for council facilities by 2028. It's not 2028, sorry. Yes, 2028. So as you can see, looking at the graph that I'm about to put up, we have actually made significant impact, particularly in the last couple of years, in tackling corporate emissions. Probably the most significant thing we've done is to enter a power purchase agreement with other councils in Victoria to purchase 100% green power from 2 wind farms in Western Victoria. And we joined with a number of other councils to do that. So this means that we've eliminated all electricity emissions and reduced our overall emissions by approximately 58%. So just going back to that previous slide, you'll see that heavy vehicles, or rather, I'm just having trouble seeing that. Just go over because I've got 2 screens open here. So electricity, we've done relatively well at. Where we're actually struggling is with our heavy vehicle fleet. And we actually had a report go up to council this year looking to replace 2 of our heavy vehicles, 2 of our garbage trucks. And we would have hoped that by this stage, given that the corporate emission plan was written in 2018, we would have hoped by this stage that we would have a full garbage truck fleet on electricity. But the technology hasn't allowed us to do that. So I was actually very disappointed that we approved the purchase of 2 fossil fuel driven waste trucks this year. We had to for health and safety reasons for the staff. But what we're finding is to reach our target, that there are some of the not only technological advances not necessarily being there, at least not in this country, but the other issue is getting the funding to replace some of our big emitters. And currently, the 2 big ones that we're having trouble with, other than our heavy vehicles, are our swimming pools. They're heated, and 58% of our current emissions come from heating those pools. But to change over to electrically heated pools, and that's for Ivanhoe and Greensborough, is in the order of many millions of dollars, which we will rely on assisted funding from federal and state, which, whilst we have put in for grants, we're still looking for approvals. Now I'm just going to move towards the other strategy for reducing emissions, and that's our community emissions plan, where we are hoping, and this is our strategic objective, to be a council overall with net zero emissions by 2040. And it's a pretty ambitious target, given that we've really only scraped the tip of the iceberg. The photo that's just come up is around our food waste, and that's been a terrific initiative for this council, where we introduced what's known as FOGO, Food Organics and Garden Organics Waste Recycling. And we went for a pretty full-on FOGO treatment of all our food waste being collected once a fortnight, and no use of plastic bin liners within our caddies. So we went for the highest level we could that was on offer, and we attracted a contract with Veolia, who are responsible for composting our food waste, and then that goes into agricultural businesses such as vineyards and the like, to act as compost. So it's nice to see that recycling of food waste. And essentially, we are saving from landfill 600 garbage trucks of waste each year on account of this recycling initiative with food waste. So that's been a really positive and effective sustainability goal and achievement for this term of council. And I say this term of council, we have 1 more year of this term of council before elections in October next year. So, and just looking at some of our urban food gardens and solar panels, our solar panel initiatives are pretty exciting, not as many as we would like to have, and the uptake has perhaps been limited, but we do run a solar savers program which aims to assist our residents source better priced solar panels, and also running audits of their home energy systems as to where residents can save on energy, and providing tips and advice free of charge. So, moving along. So, in the upcoming 2 years, we're going to be looking, as I mentioned earlier, to electrify our aquatic centres in Ivanhoe and Greensborough. It will exceed $10 million for sure. Just the overhaul of Ivanhoe Aquatic is estimated at $30 million. And transition of our fleets, such as our waste trucks, to green alternatives. Limited commercially viable options at present, but it's something that we are pressuring our officers to at least bring one truck on so that we can indeed start to make some dents in that area. I was recently presented with a range of power tools that our operations staff have also lobbied for in operations to replace their petrol-driven tools. So things like jackhammers. We're now using battery-operated jackhammers. We're using battery-operated concrete screeders. And we're just about to launch 2 battery-driven lawn mowers. Now, what the staff have told us is that not only are we doing the right thing by the environment by replacing all the tools that are used to make our roads, repair and build footpaths, and do the various maintenance and construction works that council is responsible for, but we're finding with these tools that they're a lot lighter to use. So staff have now recorded a lot fewer injuries and days off work due to injuries caused by using heavy motorised equipment. So that's been a real interesting, I suppose, value add element of transferring from fuel-driven to electrical battery-driven power tools. So with our community emissions, we're advocating for stronger state and federal government emission targets. 2050 is just too far, so 2040 is the benchmark we've set. But we realise that tackling climate change is a super wicked problem, and there's no way that a local government agency can operate on its own. So we operate not just as a council on its own, but we partner up with 8 other councils to form an allegiance of 9 councils that comes together to work on large issues that a single council couldn't effectively address on its own. So that comes under the banner of the Northern Council Alliance, and it is largely attended by chief executive officers of each of the 9 councils in the northern region of Melbourne, as well as the mayor. So the other challenge is supporting residents and businesses, as I mentioned earlier, to electrify their homes and improve energy efficiency. And whilst I mentioned a couple of incentives, including incentives for our business park in Heidelberg West, we're still a long way off actually making a serious dent into community emissions. And given that corporate emissions only account for 3% of the overall emissions generated by Banyule City and its communities, it is serious. It's a serious area that we realise we have to tackle if we're going to reach net zero emissions for the entire city by 2040. So our strategic directions for urban food, urban forest, and towards zero waste have been the major initiatives for 2023. Biodiversity and a review of our corporate emissions reduction plan, and the introduction of another plan, a new plan, lots of plans happening in Banyule, is climate adaptation. I think, and it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on this as well. We've come to a point where we realise that mitigation, while it's important and we still need to work towards mitigation, that climate change is here, and it looks like we could well exceed 1.5 degrees, even though that was the aim that we were trying to keep under the through the Paris Agreement. We now recognise that we need to be acting to adapt to climate change. And how do we do that? Well, we've looked at strategies through our urban forests, such as tackling urban heat island, for example. What are the major transport routes, especially for active transport like walking, to get from people's homes to major activity areas such as railway stations, shopping centres, the local library? How can people walk to these areas on a hot sunny day and be shaded for that entire journey? How many more trees do we need to plant? Are trees the only answer? We know that personal health is affected through warm days, especially in the case of heat waves, where we have extended periods of heat, and that those extended periods do not incur sufficient cooling at night, and that a lot of issues in terms of health occur due to lack of nighttime cooling. We also know that adequate shading of your property through shade trees can reduce the temperature on a property by 6 degrees. Now, all that evidence is out there. And how do we, through our urban forest strategy, which for the most part can effectively tackle public land, how do we influence what's happening on private land? And private land forms the majority of land holding in Banyule, as it does for all of the Melbourne metropolitan area. So climate adaptation is a plan that will start being worked on in 2024. Water management and community climate action. As I mentioned earlier, we realise that community climate action is an area we need to be focusing on a lot more for serious reductions in emissions. Water management is another area that this council has been working on, particularly with the last 10-year drought we had. I mean, we've gone through a number of years now of La Nina, and I'm also wondering whether even with this summer we've had a prediction of a long, hot, dry summer, and that's possibly still before us. But I think you'll agree that so far in Victoria anyway, we've had a relatively mild summer with interspersed with frequent rain. So we understand that drought will come again, but in the last drought, Council did install a number of extensive multi-million-dollar water harvesting projects to capture a significant amount of runoff, particularly in our main playing fields. And Susan, you'd know that over at Chelsworth Park, quite an elaborate underground system was introduced there. And that system in Chelsworth Park collects water all the way from Ivanhoe Shopping Centre, which is a number of kilometres away from the park itself. And that goes through a filtration system before entering the tanks under the playing fields at Chelsworth Park. So that's another area we'll be looking to spend more time on in 2025. Our first urban food strategy. So this has been a terrific initiative, which really started when I, having had a real interest in food security and also food health and the power of food to bring community together, and having been involved in the development of a number of community gardens in the Banyule area, I felt that it was timely for this council to prepare an urban food strategy. So I suggested it to my fellow councillors, one of whom suggested that it was a stupid idea, and another one suggested, well, they're all the same, aren't they? So why don't we just take one from another council and put our own logo on it? And I thought, right, well, I think responses like that really indicate that the level of, or the lack of understanding of what a food strategy is. And I think I'll do some homework on this and present some statistics. So the staff and counsellors were really taken by some of the aims that I did present. And some of the statistics in Banyul, we actually do not meet the average for healthy eating, particularly when it comes to eating fresh fruit and vegetables when compared against the Melbourne metro averages. So that was one reason that I thought we needed more education and a campaign around healthy food options. We also have some of the poorest socio-economic areas in Melbourne, and food security is a real issue for those places. We do have a wonderful volunteer service whose acronym is BANSIC, which does provide food parcels for those in need every week. And from time to time, I've volunteered there, and they do an absolutely sterling job of helping people not only eat food on a regular basis, but eat nutritious food on a regular basis. And the other driver for an urban food strategy, which perhaps doesn't affect Banyul directly in terms of land management planning, is the protection of our green wedge and peri-urban zones, where we do have still a significant amount of food produced which serves Melbourne's food bowl. Melbourne used to be provided by the majority of its food on its boundaries in its peri-urban areas, and that has largely diminished over time. We probably now source less than 40%, whereas it used to be closer to 100% of locally grown and sourced food. And with the pressures of our ever expanding urban areas, those areas tend to eat into what is prime agricultural land. Our urban food strategy says this has got to stop. We need more medium density development, which does need to be done respectfully in relation to neighbourhood character, and we believe it can be done respectfully while also retaining our food bowl. Now, we've just gone through a pandemic, and we've seen what it's like if the supply chain with regards to food supply is disrupted via interstate and also international supply. So I think going forward, particularly with climate change and increases potentially in situations like pandemics, shocks to our system caused by flooding and drought, which can disrupt the supply chain in relation to food, we need to know that we can feed a population of 5 million with locally sourced food, and we need to protect that food bowl. So advocacy on the part of the urban food strategy is something that that this food strategy calls for. Now, to launch the strategy, we asked Emeritus Professor Michael Buxton to come to Banyul, and you might know Michael Buxton as a renowned international speaker as well as urban planner on protecting peri-urban areas. He had a look at our urban food strategy and felt that it was a leader in its class worldwide, because this is an issue affecting nations around the world, and it also figures in the Sustainable Development Goals for the United Nations, tackling food insecurity and the associated poverty that goes with it. So exciting things happening on this front. Many people too who were involved in the urban food strategy and who we reached out to, this has probably been one of the most engaged projects we've undertaken in my term of council. Susan will attest to the fact that community engagement is a big deal for me. And it was one of the reasons that I ran for council, to actually implement more bona fide, meaningful engagement with our community. So in the preparation of this strategy, we reached out to over 700 people. And by reaching out, I mean we got feedback from over 700 people, and we did it through a number of ways. Whilst I support digital platforms for community engagement, and all councils use them now, I would never just endorse that as an only platform. I think that if we're bona fide about consulting with our community, then we need to be meeting them face to face, and we need to go out to the community on their terms. We need interceptions. We need to be out in our parks. We need pop-ups in our shopping centres, libraries, railway stations. We need kitchen table talks where small groups in safe spaces can feel free to express themselves and have the space to have a voice. We need to engage a variety of forms of engagement to suit the very diverse types of people we have in our community if we're bona fide about engagement. And that's what I was able to have undertaken with this, being the chair of this project. So a number of images there, including one of our urban farm. Who would think we would have an urban farm in a middle ring suburb of Melbourne? I mean, we're only about 8 kilometres as the crow flies, if not less, from the CBD of Melbourne, and yet we do have an urban farm here, which opens its gates to the public on Fridays and Saturdays through the farm gate, and it does a wonderful job of involving volunteers, teaching them how to grow food, and integrating with the special school next door. So it's actually not on council land, it's on state Department of Education land, and students from the special school get involved in all sorts of aspects of maintaining and running an urban farm. Everything from planting, weeding, to making vegan dog biscuits, can you believe? So we'll move ahead.
I'm just aware of the time, Alida, so be aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. And I do need these reminders because, yes, I tend to be a bit passionate about it and can go overboard very quickly. And just a couple of the organisations we partner with: the Northern Alliance for Greenhouse Action, and that covers the 9 member councils working collaboratively on programs like changing the Victorian planning controls so that no new bills can allow any fossil fuels. That's the sort of thing we get involved in at that level, very difficult on our own. We have board representation on Climate Emergency Australia. I'm council's board member, and our aim there is to encourage as many councils across this country as possible to declare a climate emergency, because once they've done that, that's then the trigger to implement actions and strategies. So that might be something, given that I am talking to you in a variety of parts of Australia, to ask your council, have you declared a climate emergency? And if you want help doing that, come and speak to me, or join Climate Emergency Australia. They've got a great website. And then ICLEI. I'm really proud that we are trialling membership with ICLEI, because this, like Zonta, is a global movement for sustainability, and it's all about getting global local government councils involved to speak to each other, share ideas and advocate for, started off on climate action, but now engages in numerous sustainability initiatives. And a big one that they are particularly proud of is Nature in Cities, because now for the first time in the history of human development, we have a global village that is more urbanised than agrarian. And that then starts to present challenges around how do we stay connected with nature if we are becoming more and more of an urban society. So that essentially speaks to the advocacy work we're doing beyond the boundaries of Banyul. I'll just flick through, and I think I think that might be about it. Slide 10. So I'll leave that presentation there if we want to go back to stopping this share, and however you would like to take it from here.
Right. Well, I think we'll open it up first of all to any questions. Thank you, Alida. First of all, that was really good to go through the realm of things that you have. I mean, I had you mentioned briefly what got you into council in the first place to step up, and that was to help your community and get that engagement and participation. So I'm glad you covered up on that. And I must congratulate you on the breadth of your activities. I noticed that you're looking at things from a scope 1 and 2 emissions angle. Have you looked at scope 3 with your purchasing policies?
Look, to be honest, I'm not quite sure. That's probably something I would have to go back and ask the staff.
Yeah.
So if I can take that on notice, Carol, and get back via Suzanne, happy to have that answered.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's scope 3s are always the hardest, because because that's are the embodied emissions in the things that you purchase. So if you're purchasing a chair, for example, how many emissions have gone into making that particular chair, and how far has it traveled to get to you? So you add up all of those emissions into your scope 3s. And so from your purchasing policies, you can actually reduce embodied emissions, which ultimately, the choices help reduce emissions as well. So it's just an interesting concept,
Thanks, Carol.
Have any other questions that they would like to ask Alida? Because
yes.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Silvana. I'm actually from the Hobart Derwent Club in Tasmania, and it's my first, and I'm sorry it's the last meeting for the year, but I've been watching your space. So thank you very much, Alida. We're sustainable in our energy because we are all electric, so it makes life a little bit easier. But I was really it was really interesting that you're in regards to heating swimming pools. We were planning in Hobart to actually build another warm-centered aquatic centre in Hobart. That was actually going to go from 7 million to 14 million. The problem in Tasmania is that we're closing swimming pools down, which has an unintended consequence of children having access to that. And yet at the same time, we're fighting the AFL football club being built along the Derwent. So there's a mismatch with needs and politics here, unfortunately. The other concern we have obviously is Hobart sits behind a very big mountain. So councils are getting involved after our Dunalley fireball that occurred in 2019. They're actually teaching mainly grandparents who end up babysitting their children when their children go to work. And I don't know if you recall the image of that woman holding her children in the water, and that was actually a grandparent. So a lot of councils are actually it's the grandparents that are coming forward to sort of learn how to deal with an emergency situation. But we all have a problem with the fuel that we have here in Hobart, I suppose, in regards to that. But what struck me was we also, unfortunately, Hobart is circulated around the hospital. So our big, I don't know, in your council, our council is trying to deal with the unintended consequences as well of people travelling to the hospital and coming to the city, the waste. And since COVID, we used to deal with a lot of waste and we used to send it to Victoria, but unfortunately we can't reach the levels of weight to actually make it viable for us to take it to Victoria to be recycled. So we actually are dumping a lot of our waste back into landfills because we can't, a lot of the companies went bust during COVID. So there are incredible challenges being on an island, but I was just wondering around healthcare, are you looking into that? Because even our pharmaceutical waste going into the Derwent and in our river is causing concern, but around your council, are you looking at those sorts of things? We do look to Victoria for ideas, by the way, because you're very innovative in that regard. So that was my last question, was around healthcare and hospital waste.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And we actually do have one of the two largest hospital precincts in the northern region of Melbourne, in Banyule, the Austin Hospital and the Mercy. And we actually, and Warringal Private, we don't do a lot with the hospitals, largely because they're state driven, and the same with their waste. As far as I'm aware, we don't really have much to do with their waste collection, and it certainly hasn't come up in discussions and strategically regarding hospitals and their waste. So that might be one that that's another question I can delve further into for you, because like I said, we are one of two of the largest and only hospital precincts in the entire northern region of Melbourne. So it's a good question, and we've had so far very little to do with our hospitals, other than when it comes to the requirement for council approvals in relation to planning. I mean, with our waste and collection of food waste, I mean, we have our challenges too, not so much with single dwellings, but our challenges are around apartments and what we call multi-unit dwellings, because we don't have the truck interfaces to be able to collect those bins. So what we have is a situation with an increasing number of apartments happening in the area, given the strategic prerogative of the state government to increase our population density. We have just over 5 million people in the Greater Melbourne area, and we're being told that that will increase to at least 8 million by 2050, if not earlier. So middle ring suburbs, which Banyule forms part of, is being pressured to take on a significant number of that additional population, and it will be through higher density and high-end medium density, so say 5-storey to 12-storey apartments. We can't at this stage collect any of their food waste, because as I said, the way our trucks collect garbage is we have sidearm loading trucks, and a lot of the apartments and even multi-unit dwellings, like some of the townhouses, require reverse entry trucks. So it's a whole new system and investment strategy to go down that path. So what we're trying to do is encourage the private sector, which is responsible for collecting waste from higher density developments, to become more strategic and more sustainable in the way it collects and then disposes of its waste. And so that's an advocacy piece that we do. But in relation to hospitals, no, I don't think we do much in that space.
Interesting. It's just that Pamela I beg your pardon, Pamela, you mentioned something about ramping up next year. I'm sorry, Pamela, where are you from? I'll go back. I beg your pardon, sorry, off the top of my head.
Sorry. So Pam, I'll talk for Pamela. I think she's just asking a question. Is the hospital waste on the swimming pools
Developing
problem?
strange.
Oh yeah. So have you got any ideas about that, Alida? The solar panels, protective structures, etc. for pools? Did you reply to that? Sorry.
We actually do have the designs in place. We're just trying to attract the funding now to convert Ivanhoe and Greensborough watermark pools to all electric. So yes, we've got that strategic approval. We've got the plans. We're just now trying to find the money.
Yeah. The usual problem. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so Pamela's on the Sustainability Strategic Committee for Monash Health in Melbourne, so she'll be onto it with the hospital waste and their strategies for moving forward. So good on you, Pamela. Nice to know. That's great. Thank you. I'm very aware of time. I'll just ask Sue to formally thank Alida for her contribution today. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, Alida, it's been fantastic. I think all of us have learned so much. I might have learned a lot because I'm in Banyule, but I think even for other people, there's a lot of takeaways that you've given them to go back to their council and their communities, the ideas of different projects, how to operate different projects, even that importance of community engagement, which is something that Zonta really believes in very strongly. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with you in the future on some of the things that you suggested, particularly, I suppose, one of my areas of interest is that whole fact that we're becoming an urban society and we're losing touch with the environment. And like you, I'm a bushwalker and cross-country skier and I see that contact with nature as being just so important in life for everybody. So I think, it's fantastic that you've given up your time today. And please stay on council for quite a while.
If I could just say, we do need more people on councils to be interested in advocating for planning and environment. We need a lot more people in this space. So if anyone's thinking of running, I'd encourage you to.
Can I just ask, sorry, I forgot to ask a question earlier. I just remembered my question. Where is the urban garden?
Oh, the urban farm?
Yeah, urban farm.
The urban farm is off Oriel Road. Do you know Oriel Road, Jasmine?
In Ivanhoe, yeah.
In Belfield, so just adjoining Ivanhoe. It's Perkins Street runs off Oriel Road, just near Ford Park. If you go down Perkins Street, you'll see it there on the right-hand side, and it's open Fridays and Saturdays.
Okay,
you can go and buy your veggies then, I think, can't you?
You can, and also locally sourced breads, locally made bread that does not operate out of any shop fronts. You can order it and have it delivered to your door at home, and they also do deliver there to a shipping container, which is where the fruit and veggies are sold. It's all very low key, and
we're all moving to value.
Yeah, okay, I'll keep that in mind. I've got a friend who's in Heidelberg, so we might do that one day. Thank you.
Sounds brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alida.
And Merry Christmas.
Alida, you're more than welcome to stay and listen in to what we do. And when you had enough, you can just leave or just leave now. It's more up to you. But you're more than welcome to stay if you'd like to just sort of find out a little bit about what we're up to. But
I'd love that, Carol. I can probably stay for about another 10 minutes if that's okay.
Not a problem. So I'll just move forward with where we're up to. I just want to sort of talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening internationally. As you're probably aware, the latest edition of the Zonta, which is our magazine from Zonta International, has a couple of things about climate action in it. you may not be aware that there's been a bit of pushback internationally on Zonta Says Now, because some members haven't got the message that it's about climate justice, and they think we're into mostly environmental issues. And they don't get that we're actually trying to close the gender gap so that women are better prepared to face the climate crisis. So we've got a few communication challenges next year. Anyway, the Zonta contained the latest version of the Zonta strategic plan. And you'll notice that the word flagship has been removed from the Zonta Says No and the Zonta Says Now campaigns, as the term was too confusing for many of our members for whom English is a second language. And anyway, the international president has been working really hard to help members understand that Zonta Says Now is all about achieving climate justice for women. In the Zonta, we had the 2-page article to highlight how climate impacts women's lives around the world. And in here, President Uta had a little bit here about when she visited Mozambique. And she was really, I spoke to her later, and she said that she was really overcome when she met with families that had lost everything in droughts and floods and fires and storms. And they were selling their only asset, the only asset left, which was their daughters, selling them into child marriage. And that it was just horrible, horrible what happens. Anyway, in November, we had the 16 days of activism, and I prepared a presentation showing how climate change contributes to violence against women. And I highlighted examples of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, human trafficking, female genital mutilation, and child marriage, how those all increase with climate change. Anyway, the video and slides of the presentation are on our think tank webpage. But here are a couple of facts that stuck in my mind when preparing the presentation. A study undertaken in India, Pakistan, and Nepal of nearly 200,000 women and girls aged 15 to 49 between 2010 and 2018 found that an increase of 1 degree in average annual temperature was connected with a 6% rise in physical and sexual domestic violence. Now, we've got, in Australia in particular, we've got a lot of heat problems, and so that was of concern to me, how that happens as well here. I don't know what the numbers would be, but it would be interesting to find out. And also, a UNICEF report found that we're at least 300 years away from ending child marriage, and that for every 10% increase or decrease in rainfall was associated with a 1% increase in child marriage. So if you had a 20% increase in rainfall, that means a 2% increase in child marriage, or a 40% decrease in rainfall is a 4% increase in child marriage. So whether it's a flood or a drought, it still means that families lose their livelihoods with their growing crops, etc., and it impacts on the girls. So to stop surging violence, we must get a better handle on climate change. Anyway, the news from COP28 this month was not brilliant, and from a gender perspective, but I got some figures from the summary of global climate action at COP28, which you might be interested in. Firstly, 133 world leaders attended, but it's still a case of spot the woman leader, as there were only 15 female leaders in attendance. Interestingly, women made up 11% of leaders this year, which is an increase on last year when there were only 7% of the leaders were women. The COP28 UAE Declaration on Gender Responsive Just Transitions was endorsed by 78 countries. This aims to drive gender-responsive just transitions which strengthen all women's and girls' leadership and meaningful participation in decision-making and livelihoods in climate action to achieve gender equality and support the sustainable and transformational impacts in adaptation, mitigation, and finance efforts. There's basically 10 specific actions in the declaration, and they incorporate things like human rights of women and girls in just transitions, enhancing access to funding for women and girls in regions most impacted by climate change, promoting measures to reduce, redistribute and value unpaid care work, including promoting the equal sharing of responsibilities between women and men within households. Anyway, there was also a call to action that came out of a global conference that was held within the COP. And this was organised by UN Women, the UNFCCC, the IUCN, and We Do. And this document called for action in 5 areas to better collect and use gender environment data to improve policy making, finance, and investment for women. Anyway, COP28 was always going to be contentious. It was held in the oil and gas state of Dubai. The COP28 president was the CEO of an oil company, and over 2,400 oil and gas industry affiliated lobbyists were registered at the event. Anyway, 2 key energy related actions were to reduce emissions in the oil and gas industry. First of all, we had the Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge that aims to triple installed renewable energy by 2030, double energy efficiency improvements every year until 2030, and accelerate the phase down, not phase out, of unabated coal power. There was also the Oil and Gas Decarbonisation Charter signed by 50 oil and gas companies that represented 40% of global production. And these companies aim to achieve net zero by 2050, address methane emissions, utilise best practices to reduce emissions by investing in future energies, increasing transparency of emissions monitoring and reporting, decarbonising operations, reducing energy poverty, and providing secure and affordable energy to support the development of all economies. Sounds good on paper. I wonder what it looks like in practice. Anyway, the outcomes for the first global stocktake were not good news. When you do the final statement, they say areas of concern, serious concern, note, and all this sort of thing in each paragraph. But there were some areas of serious concern. And these were that 2023 was the warmest year on record, and the impacts of climate change are accelerating. Global greenhouse gas emissions trajectories are not in line with the Paris Agreement, and there's a rapidly narrowing window for raising ambition and implementing existing commitments to achieve it. Overall, it was good news that we're seeing the beginning of the end of fossil fuels, and there was some movement on loss and damage payments. But is it 30 years too late? Anyway, time will tell. So I want to look at what's been happening closer to home. And I came across this cartoon. The Climate Council has some great initiatives, and they had the inaugural Climate Award for the Australian Cartoonists Association Stanley Award this year, which was won by Megan Herbert. And it's the domino effect. What harm could one more do? That's a coal mine approval, very appropriate for Australia, I think, at the moment. And the second of those dominoes is actually ice shelf collapse. And then it goes into sea level rise, biodiversity loss, extreme weather, food shortages, total system collapse, ending on life as we know it. I think that's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And another cartoon I liked, which was one of the finalists, was this one. One day, all of this will be yours to deal with. Which made me think about the Climate Change Amendment Duty of Care and Intergenerational Climate Equity Bill. What a mouthful. Okay. Luckily, it's known as the Duty of Care Bill. This was introduced into Parliament by Senator David Pocock after being approached by Anjali Sharma. Now, members will remember Anjali as the lead litigant in the Sharma versus Minister for the Environment case, when 8 young people tried to stop expansions to a coal mine as the emissions would contribute to harming their future health and well-being. The case was lost as the Minister of the Environment indicated that it was beyond her existing legal powers to consider future generations. Well, Angela decided that a law was required. So she basically went door knocking until she got to David Pocock, so as they could actually come together to create this law. And what they're looking at is the legislation is designed to require decision makers to consider the health and well-being of children in Australia when making significant decisions, and require decision makers not to make significant decisions in relation to the exploration or extraction of coal, oil, or natural gas if the decision poses a material risk of harm to the health and well-being of children in Australia. So you can follow the bill's progress through the Parliament of Australia website. And David Pocock, I mean, there's a whole web page about the bill which they have, and it's really well worth a look. And he says we should be thinking about young people when we make decisions. It's our duty as politicians and policymakers to make sure the climate young people and future generations inherit is one that they can live and thrive in. Makes sense. I want to be part of a parliament, and more importantly, a country that takes this responsibility seriously. It's bread and butter stuff. And Anjali, like so many of my friends, I'm increasingly scared about my future. The past few years have seen temperatures that have broken records and climate-fueled natural disasters unfolding across the world. And all evidence shows us this will only get worse unless we act. We're at the crossroads in history. The government can either act in accordance with its duty to young people to deliver us a safe and livable future, or set us on a path to climate catastrophe. Anyway, it's amazing with Anjali. I think she's only now 19, 20. It's so much. I'm so impressed with Anjali. I think she's brilliant. Anyway, as a result of this, we had the opportunity to make a submission to the climate change on the bill to the Senate Environment and Communications Legislation Committee. The submissions had to be in before the 4th of December. So I sat down one day and just did something so as we could actually end up with a submission, putting something in. So on your behalf, basically, I put this submission in, and I've just taken the line, I outlined what Zonta is, and then basically talked about the links between global heating and increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events have been well documented. The Lancet reported the global north, of which Australia is a part, contributed to 92% of the excess atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration, yet all countries, rich and poor, feel the impacts. Went on about girls' education is particularly at risk from climate change in poorer countries. For example, in Africa, girls in drought-impacted countries spend longer collecting water, food, and fuel, exposing them to greater risk of sexual violence and causing them to miss school or be too tired to learn. Girls whose families have been economically impacted by floods and firestorms are forced to leave school and find a job or be sold into child marriage. When floods and droughts affect the availability of water at school, menstruating girls and teachers are likely to miss school. And the longer climate-related disasters keep girls out of school, the less likely they are to return. I mentioned that fact about the 10% increase or decrease associated with the child marriage, and then talked about the Gender and Diversity Australia, pointing out that gender-based violence increases after a disaster. Children exposed to violence experience long-lasting development, health, and well-being issues. And in Australia, 1 in 6 girls and 1 in 9 boys have experienced physical and/or sexual violence or witnessed parental violence before the age of 15. And in coming years, how many more children will suffer from violence triggered by extreme heat, drought, bushfires, flood storms, and sea level rise? Climate change presents serious mental health risks, especially for young people. In a survey of 10,000 young people in 10 countries, 2/3 of young Australians felt the government lied about the effectiveness of its climate actions and was failing young people across the world. And overall, the survey concluded that climate change, climate anxiety, and inadequate government response are all chronic stressors that could threaten the mental health and well-being of children and young people around the world. So what we do in Australia ultimately contributes to the suffering of children at home and abroad. In Wales, a Future Generations Commissioner is a guardian for future generations. but in Australia, who can we rely on to protect our grandchildren's future? We're a rich, well-educated nation, blah, blah, blah. We've got immense natural resources, potential to create a world-leading economy based on renewable energy. We can create sustainable jobs for future generations. Green hydrogen and steel are all doable. Yet we choose to throw away a secure long-term economic future by supporting the expansion of short-lived fossil fuel-based industries. Morally reprehensible, knowing what we know about climate change, that fossil fuel industries can legally expand their operations in Australia. Something is fundamentally wrong when the Environment Minister is not required to consider climate threats when assessing projects. We must do better, we can do better, and basically talk about it being a sensible approach. So you can see that it's on the website for the Senate, but at least we've got our voice in there. So we have our winners of the Women Taking Climate Action Award. Now, the $1,000 award is funded by the Zonta Club of Melbourne on Yarra, and an anonymous donor contributed another $1,000 as we had 2 amazing women to honour this year. At the District 23 conference, it was agreed that this will become a district award in the 2024-26 biennium, with all clubs contributing to the award. At the last meeting, the winners had just been announced, but we didn't share much information. Sue prepared a summary in the news flash, and we put a post on the website. But I just want to acknowledge Alana Mountain from Victoria, who's the campaign coordinator of the Forest Collective. Alana was a guest speaker at our think tank meeting in December 2021. So please take a look at her video, as it contains some marvellous footage of her collecting data on the greater glider at night in the forests. For over 10 years, she's worked with determination and dedication to protect the beautiful flora and fauna of the Central Highlands, and has been teaching women to climb trees so they can collect the necessary data. And her research data was used in the legal case to show successfully that the logging industry had not been taking the necessary studies and steps to protect the greater glider. And this ultimately led to the shutdown of the logging of native forests in Victoria. So well done, Alana. And then we had Dr. Anne Polina from the Kimberley region of WA, a community leader, human and earth rights advocate, linked to the land and water of the Kimberley region, and has for many years helped heal country, climate and communities. She's a professor and research fellow at Notre Dame University in WA, Charles Darwin University in the NT and the ANU. She's a chair of the Matawara Fitzroy River Council that recognises that the river is a living ancestral being with a right to life and flow. And she's a member of the director of the Kimberley Land Council, and she's involved with the Murray-Darling Basin and its inaugural Indigenous member on the advisory committee. She's recognised globally for her work with climate and water justice and with First Nations women, giving them opportunities to have a voice and lead. She sees her role as protecting Mother Earth and the importance of Indigenous knowledge in being able to do this. She says that traditional women's law is about maintaining and protecting the spirit of the country, and that is central to protecting humanity now, and promotes two-way science, which connects Western and Indigenous knowledge. And we're going to ask Anne to come and speak to us next year. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. So what else do we have to share? Well, I was visiting the Perth EV Expo in November, and I met with Craig Rocastle. So thanks, Alida. He was a guest urging us all to buy EVs, and he's a very engaging speaker and attracted quite an audience. And at the expo, I met up with Joyce Urseg, she's just at the back here, from the Citizens Climate Lobby, who was one of our speakers earlier in the year. Anyway, yesterday, with my En-ROADS Climate Ambassador hat on, I was using the climate simulator, and I went with Joyce and a team from the Citizens Climate Lobby to brief WA Senator Fatima Payman. Senator Payman is also a member of the Senate Standing Committee on Environment and Communication that's reviewing the Duty of Care Bill. Isn't it funny how things work? Such a small world. Interestingly, that standing committee has 7 senators, 6 women and 1 man. I was so impressed with Senator Payman. She's a refugee from Afghanistan, and I encourage you to listen to her maiden speech in Parliament. She's intelligent, energetic, and interested in learning, and she's a strong supporter of gender equality. The CCL hope to build relationships with the Senator and other female politicians in the coming months. So I'm going to keep close to them and see what happens, see what we can do. Anyway, do you have any other news that you would like to share? Anybody got anything that they'd like to share? Everyone's gone quiet. Hi. Just making sure. All right then.
I'm here. Can
Okay, nice to see you.
How are you?
Mission controlees. That's
Yes.
great.
Yeah, being very silent today though.
Being
but
very silent. That's okay.
Yeah, interestingly, my niece works for Banyule Council, so that's sort of an interesting little aside. No, I just wanted to say hi to everybody, but also to say convention registration will be opening in about a month's time. You should have received an email from Zonta International, I think, in the last day or so about that. We're just testing at the moment. We've just had a visit to Brisbane with Megan Radovich and Kate Edrin from Zonta International headquarters. So that was a pretty busy week, but firmed up pretty much everything that we're doing in terms of venue for the convention, but also for functions, various functions that have to be organised. So there'll be an email going out to anyone that's put their name on the volunteer list in the next couple of days, just saying we really haven't forgotten about you, but it's a bit hard to say to you, okay, Carol, you've put your name down, so on the 30th, you're going to be in the auditorium on door 3, you know, from 10 till 2 or whatever. So a little bit early for that sort of detail, but ultimately that's where we'll, where we'll get to in the next little while after Christmas. So that's about it, unless anyone has some questions about convention that I might be able to help with.
No, it's it must be getting really coming to the pointy end now.
Oh, scarily so at the moment, you know, lots of little things going on, you know, lots of little, not fires so much, but just, you know, fingers in lots of pies at the moment, but it will get there, you know, so it's all positive, which is great.
Excellent. Well, if you need downtime, you know who you can laugh with. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
have to keep ourselves safe.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I just want to share with you, reflect on what we've done this year. We started in February with Oscar's poem. Do you remember Oscar's poem talking about one word act? And we also did an in-depth on bushfires, okay, and how they are in Australia and what we need to do about them. In April, we had Amanda Lamont from the Australasian Women in Emergencies Network and Joyce Urseg from the Citizens Climate Lobby speaking. And that was also the month when the AR6 synthesis report came out, saying, you know, brought everything together. In June, we had Pamela White talking about the work that she'd done in Nepal and all the things about sanitation, cooking, and those little huts that the women were forced to live in during their periods. And then Margaret Thomas was telling us about how she had worked at the UNDP and the work she'd done with AusAid, etc., and what the UNDP did. In August, we had Charlotte Sterrett from the Yarra River Keepler. And wasn't she interesting? She has so experienced from World Vision and Oxfam. She was their climate change advisor for years. And she gave us a really good presentation on gender and climate justice. And that month, we also shared the action guides that had been developed by the Intercontinental think tank. In September, we had the district conference, and we all got to meet Natalie Isaacs in person, which was great. And that was when we launched our disaster management leaflet as well. And then in October, we had Amy Steele sharing her personal journey, which was really good. And Vicky was sharing her experiences of doing her What I'm Ready morning teas with her friends and going through the resources that they had. We also shared the results of the Zonta Says Now Global Members Survey, getting their feedback on what they want to do as Zonta Says Now. And there was also the Women Taking Climate Action Award was judged at that time. And then just now we've had a leader talking about local government. I love it that her name is a leader. I think that's wonderful. And with local government, we had feedback on COP28 and telling you about the duty of care submission for that bill. So we've not done badly this year. And finally, as we always say, this Christmas, it's a great time to give a present for the future. So acknowledge yourself and your family and friends for taking climate action in 2023. You know, our next meeting is going to be on Saturday, the 17th of February. And I'm pretty sure that our guest speaker will be Caitlin Richards from the Climate Action Nurses. She's based in Tasmania. And so it'll be really good to put the date in the diary. So it's been a very busy year. And I'd like to thank you all to being shining lights in Zonta in 2023. I appreciate your contribution and support for everything that you've done through Zonta Says Now throughout the year, and look forward to seeing what we can come up with in 2024. So I think that email me if you've got any questions. Don't forget to check for information on the website. There's always stuff going up there. And again, thank you for your participation and contribution today. And remember to keep breathing, keep smiling, and have fun on your Zonta Says Now journey.